What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Valor Fire Training Podcast show. I am joined tonight by Ian Bennett. How's it going, man?
It's going good, Dave. How are you doing?
I'm wonderful. I'm wonderful. I know
I
we've
just
we've
have to
talked.
say, I've always appreciated the fact that you have Dr. Dre, Today Was a Good Day, as your intro music.
Dude, listen, I went through like hundreds of different audios to try to figure out which one I wanted, and then I was like, all right, that's dope. I got to use that one. Like, and I'm sure I'm probably going to get a copyright infringement at some point, but I'm gonna ride that out until it happens. But no, we've been talking about doing this for a while, so I'm glad that I finally got you on the show. It's been a long. I mean, we've talked for quite a while about different things, so I'm glad to have you. For those of you that don't know Ian, he is the owner and operator of West Coast Fire Training. He got in the fire service in 2006. Currently works for the Seattle Fire Department and also an instructor for the Washington State Fire Academy. So, Ian, why don't you kind of tell everybody a little bit about you in your own words, and kind of what you're all about?
I'll start with a quick correction, Dave. I don't actually work for the Washington State Fire Training Academy anymore. I worked for them
Okay,
for about 3.5 years, but once I got promoted and moved into recruit training, I didn't have time for that anymore.
gotcha.
So it
Okay,
was a good time. I learned a lot there, but I'm not actually currently affiliated with them. So what I'm all about, I'm pretty much all about the fire service. My it's my job and it's also my hobby. Some people like to fish, some people, you know, do other things. I started a company and, and go light things on fire. So it's besides hanging out with my wife and kids, it's pretty much fire department all the time. I have decided that work life balance is a thing for other people.
yep,
It's not for me.
yep. No, and that's it's funny because my wife, not unlike I'm sure your wife, it kind of crossed that threshold where we were out there, we were doing training. It was just a group of guys that like going out and doing training for people, and then all of a sudden it was like, hey, you really need to knock this off because you're gone all the time, and there's no tax write off, there's no anything. And so she was the one that was like, you actually need to have a training company and like you need to make this a formal thing. And so I think that's kind of the natural progression, but it's cool because as I've gotten into this and as I've gotten to be an instructor a little bit longer, I've met guys like you and like others like us who kind of had a similar story going into it, right? And so like you're extremely driven when it comes to the fire service, and I know other people who are as well. And so it's cool to have people like you on the show where we can sit there and talk about things that you're super, super passionate, which the thing that I know you're most passionate about is acquired structures and 1403, right?
Mostly live fire training in acquired
Okay.
structure, and 1403 governs that. So just being responsible, I've got to know a lot about 1403. But it's a small piece. I wouldn't say I'm super passionate about it. It's kind of like knowing the rules of the road. I'm not
Yep.
passionate about speed limits, but I know them.
Right, right. And we're going to dive into that a little bit more. But it's really funny because I feel like they go hand in hand. We had Dave Pruitt on the show talking about acquired structures in Texas, and how he does stuff. And it's funny because you always get drawn back into that 1403 conversation because you can't do it without acknowledging 1403, right? I mean, otherwise it becomes negligent and you're just kind of out there doing it willy nilly. And so I'm going to dive into that with you. I won't spoil anything, but I'm going to dive into that with you here in a little bit about what things you think need to happen. Because I
Yeah,
know
absolutely.
I have my ideas of what I'd like to see 1403 be, but I definitely want to hear yours. So let's start with when we talk about live fire, why is it so important in the fire service to have live fire? Because there are a lot of places that don't. I mean, there are places that can do fire one class and the students never go inside of a live fire.
I mean, I think it's vital because it's the only way to truly prepare for actually fighting a fire. You would not expect a professional boxer to never spar. Um, you would never expect a soldier never to fire their gun. And to expect a professional firefighter to go into a burning building, put out a fire in zero visibility, and drag a civilian out without ever experiencing that before, I can't understand that thought process personally. That's one of the reasons that in West Coast fire training, we stress keeping the students inside the fire building as long as possible throughout the entire progression of the fire from ignition to extinguishment, because the problem is most firefighters don't actually go to a lot of fires. And even if you do go to a lot of fires, a burning building, when you're actually trying to put it out, is a terrible learning environment. You don't know all the factors involved. You don't know the layout. You don't know the fuel load.
Right.
You don't know what other actions are being taken on the fire ground at the same time. And so you can learn things, and there's certain things you can only learn by actually fighting real fires, but it's still not a great learning environment. You need to put people in an environment where you can control all the factors, where you can say, we're going to create a very specific condition, and I want you to react in a specific way. And I'm going to change these variables so that you can see the difference when I open this door, when I close this door, how the heat changes. And if you, that the only way to do that is live fire training with the student inside. There's small props like the dollhouse and other things where you can show the effect from the exterior, but they don't have the same mental impact. So if you imagine the interior of an actual building that's on fire, it's hot, there's zero visibility, there's probably a lot of noise, there's a lot of obstacles that you have to negotiate. So as human beings, there are some fundamental fears that we all possess just because we're human beings. And the live fire environment, the inside of a burning building, triggers almost all of those fundamental fears. Now, that doesn't mean I show up and I'm terrified when I cross the door, but it does mean that I'm at a much higher natural stress level when I arrive. And what's the way that you lower that stress level? You get people used to the environment. Navy SEALs don't do drown training by just throwing people in and hoping they survive. There's a progression
Right.
that starts with providing information, ensuring basic skills, and then slowly building difficulty over time. And we need to do the same thing. Why are so many people worried or when they cross the threshold of burning buildings? Because they have no idea what is going on. Right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
if you can place people in that environment, watch the progression over time, watch extinguishment, then you can lower the stress level because they've been there before.
Yeah. Well, and you bring up a really good point, and for the viewers that have heard me say this, I'm sorry because you've heard me say this 100 times, and for the people that haven't heard it, uh, we created that, right? Like the American Fire Service created the situation that you and I are discussing right now, because when we first started in the fire service, you were roughly, I mean, you were a couple years behind me, but like when we started in the fire service, we burned real stuff. Like we had very realistic fire training, and then the push came to make things safer. And so they moved away from live fire. They moved towards the LPG gas props with the dead man switch. And so, like, I don't advocate for, ultra risky, high stakes stuff at the beginning. But why are we not in the American Fire Service today? Why are we not putting our people in those situations that are going to as closely resemble what they're going to see when they get out in the field? Because I'm sure you've seen in your experience, um, the people that go through Fire 1, Fire 2 Academy, and then they go into their first fire and they're like, dude, that was nuts. That was so dark. It was so hot. I didn't know it was going to be like that. And it's like, what the hell have you been doing for the last 4 months? Like, where have you been? Well, if you think about it, that's all they know is that, it's light, hazy, white smoke. If you stand up, you can see over it. And if the person goes like this off the dead man switch, the fire goes out.
Yeah, they they were taught to expect a certain thing, right? You can tell them over and over a real fire will be like this, but if they have no experience with that, it'll be a surprise regardless. Going back to the boxing analogy, and I'm a huge fan of combat sports,
Sure.
but if I tell you to hit the heavy bag all the time and then say, by the way, the first time you get hit in the face, it's going to feel like this. So you should do this. Guess what? The first time you get hit in the face, you're gonna flinch. You're gonna say, "Man, I had no idea it was gonna be like that." And I, as an instructor, if I say, "Well, I told you it was gonna be like that," but I've never created that experience for them, that's on me as an instructor. But back to your point about the safety piece, you're right that as in the American Fire Service, we created an environment where students are arriving at their first fire often unprepared for what they're about to deal with. But we also created the need for that safety culture. If you read the line of duty deaths and significant injuries associated with the creation of 1403, I mean, we needed something. We may disagree with how that standard is formed, but we needed something. And I would disagree with how we've chosen to solve that problem. I think we should solve it more like mountain climbers or, technical rescue folks. Who solve it through risk mitigation and education,
Right.
as opposed to saying we just can't do that, because that creates other problems. So I personally feel like if we reduce the realism of live fire training with the goal of reducing the risk to students and instructors, we don't actually reduce risk. We just change where it happens. We
Right.
reduce the risk of the training environment, but we increase the risk of the operational environment. And if we reduce the risk of the operational environment by changing our tactics, then we've removed the risk for ourselves, but increased the risk to the public. And we can make decisions about how much risk we want or where we want to risk for ourselves. But I don't think we get to decide to say, you, the public, get to take a higher risk now because I'm uncomfortable training myself.
No, I completely agree. And so expand on that a little bit though, because like okay, so like you brought up some really good points. But I want you to expand a little bit more on like the expectation of the civilian and how we're training. Like, and I asked this question I was doing a class a couple years ago, and I asked a bunch of people, just like in the grocery store, I would just stop random people and I'd be like, let me ask you a question real quick. I'm a firefighter. What do you expect from firefighters? Like when they show up, if you were in an emergency, what would you expect? And the answers were like super stupid simple. Like if my house is on fire, I want them to put it out. If I'm trapped, I want them to come get me. If my kids are trapped, I want me to find them and do everything that they can do to protect them. That's as basic as it comes. But I feel like we always kind of overcomplicate it. Like, well, the citizens want us to be fiscally responsible, and the citizens want us to make sure that we're doing things the safest way we can. They don't give a shit. They don't care. They want us to come find them. They want us to help them when they need help. And they want us to come and do it with a smile on our face. Like, that's it. So, to talk a little bit about your view on that, like as far as how you think training plays into that.
Well, I would expect a civilian would want their firefighters to be comfortable and competent in the live fire environment. Like the idea that a firefighter would not be confident crossing the threshold into a burning building, I think that would surprise most civilians. And I would say that we as trainers have to meet that expectation. Yeah, I thought you illustrated it quite well with just your
Sorry.
examples.
Sorry.
But it's funny. I have those same conversations with family members about tactics, and they'll kind of roll your eyes. Like I remember we first started talking about flowing and moving, or cooling as you advanced, and telling my mother about that, and she was like, "Whoa, wait! You're telling me if it's hot as you're crawling down the hallway, and you have a hose line, you're not going to flow water? Like, why not? That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And then, you struggle to say, well, we used to have this belief, and people just look at you like, what? Oh, okay. We're talking
Yeah.
about ventilation with my dad. Like, oh, so you're telling me firefighters had to say, oh, we should not break all the windows right next to the fire because that'll make it bigger? It's like, have these people never had a campfire before, or like used a wood stove? Like, you're telling me this is the latest greatest research that's coming out of UL? Like,
Yeah.
okay.
Well, and so we had, you'll love this. So we have a friend of ours and a couple that we hang out with, and the husband is in the military, and so we were having a discussion, and of course it's like a measuring contest, like, oh, I fly helicopters, and I'm like, that's cool. We're going to burning buildings, and so like it was hilarious when we were having this conversation because the wives were like, oh my god, but as we're talking about it, we started comparing notes, and he was like, so let me get this right. He's like, so you guys, when you go into a burning building, like you guys just flow water everywhere, right? Like you just go in there and you open up the nozzle and water sprays everywhere. And I'm like, well, interesting story. And so we had that discussion where I was like, things change from time to time. And so the newer way of doing it is, yes, once you go in, you open up the line, everything gets better. And he comes back to me and he goes, yeah, so I'm not going to lie, man. Like if I'm in combat and people are shooting at me, I'm not going to wait until I come up on them to like shoot my gun. I'm going to be shooting the entire time as I'm running up to them. And I'm like, yeah, that's actually a really fair point. Like I feel like we were so behind the eight ball on this whole thing where it's like every other, profession is like, we need to be proactive. We need to make sure we're doing what we need to do to achieve our goal. And we were just like, don't flow water until you see flames.
So I'll tell you, and this is just a pet theory of mine that I've kicked around with some friends, and we all like it, but who knows if it'll ever be proven.
Oh, I already love it. I don't know what it is, but I love it.
But after training in a fixed facility, a concrete fixed facility for a while, I think we have training scars from the fixed facility. Because if I had training especially in a concrete building, you know how it reacts. I flow a ton of water, especially in the afternoon after we've burned for a while and the whole building is 500 degrees just sitting there. I am gonna steam the crap out of myself. I can't flow enough water to cool that building off.
Right.
And so as the instructor, you begin to develop these kind of survival strategies. Like, how do I accomplish this goal of getting the student to advance to the fire and put the fire out, but I also have to get reset times fast enough. So, okay, kid, don't flow too much water. Just flow it right on the seat, and then back out, because the building doesn't react in a real way, right? And so you train over and over and over in this building, and then guess what? If we don't go to a lot of fires and we've got great gear, we can do the same tactic most of the time in real life, and we'll get through it. Right. And also, if we go down a hot, dark, smoky hallway and get to the fire and see it with the whites of our eyes and flow some water, and we come out and we melted a little bit of our helmet, don't we look badass on the way out?
Right.
So it hits those ego points, and we've got that training piece where we're getting the wrong lesson. I actually had an instructor one time, a newer instructor in that fixed facility. Same thing. It's clean burning fuels, and you can get that layer of smoke where you stand up above it and you can see. And this instructor actually told the students, "Hey, check this out. You should try that sometime in a real fire, because that might help you."
Really?
Yeah. And I was like, man, where is this coming from? You're playing to the prop. We play to the prop. It's the same reason, and this might be controversial to all you Draeger lovers out there. It's the same reason I don't like the lesson plan for flash props.
Okay.
Love the concept of the flash prop, like the ability to see the early stages of flashover happening, seeing the bottom of the smoke lighting off. Like, that visual cue has literally saved my life.
Right.
But the programmed reaction of, hey, just hit the overhead real quick, don't hit it too much so we can see it again and again and again, that is that's wrong, right? I'm just
Yeah.
gonna say it. You should not train like that. You should do what you need to do, because we know that habits programmed under stress will be repeated under stress. So if you tell someone to pencil in a flash box, their go-to will be to pencil again, unless you overtrain in a different setting to offset that bad rep.
Right.
I would rather just show a video of a flash box and say, "Hey, look at this," because I've never actually been in a Draeger proc. I've just watched them on YouTube.
Right.
So but the first time I saw it happening, I was like, I know what that is. I'm going to open the line right now, or things are going to be terrible.
Yeah, this is really bad. This is really, really, really bad. So, and it's funny that you bring that up because, like, okay, so we were just up in Nebraska doing a training, and it's a Connex box training facility, right? It was built by the host department in Osceola, and they did a phenomenal job. But the way that they designed it was that it had a 20-foot Connex box bolted onto the backside, so that's your burn room, and then everything inside is rooms and hallways and stairs and things like that. But we as instructors, and I know West Coast fire training is probably very much like this as well, but when we go to do our burns, we tell the students at the very beginning, don't go and just try to put the fire out for 30 seconds. You need to go in the room and put the fire completely out. And we want you guys to pull material and start doing overhaul. And we upped it this time. We actually built an overhaul prop. So outside of the burn room, there was a piece where it had 2x4s and sheetrock, and we shoved all sorts of, we shoved all sorts of crap up in there. And so these students, it was so crazy to watch these students because, I mean, they had varying levels of experience. Some of them were like 6 months on a department, and some of them were 30 years on a career department. And every time they'd go in and they'd hit the fire, you'd watch them go psh, 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 down the hallway, and then they'd stop themselves and they'd be like, oh yeah, they said to open up the line. So then they'd open the line. And then when they got into the fire room after knocking the fire down, they'd shut it down and then they'd start backing out. And I'm like, hey, what are you doing? And they're like, well, we got to back out because the evolution's over. I'm like, the evolution is not over until the fire is completely out. Oh shit, yeah. And their go-to, because they could see it, was to go over and overhaul the burn pile. And then they'd turn around and it's like, oh, hey, there's fire on the ceiling. There's shit burning up there. And so you'd see a guy come in with a hook and start pulling the ceiling. But it took like 3 or 4 evolutions before everybody caught on. So do you think that that's the training scars? Like, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, it definitely sounds like it. And let me say, I am not against fixed facilities. I think fixed facilities can be great training if we use them appropriately. I think a lot of our problem is that we try and force certain structures to do things that they're not good for. Right? Acquired structures, not good for high rep training. Fixed facilities, great for high rep training. And for instance, acquired structures, I never do large scale evolutions at acquired structures because acquired structures are too difficult to control. Yeah. Right? You have so many uncontrolled factors that one person has an issue, and now we're either extinguishing the fire with the safety line, in which case the whole thing's a waste, or we're losing the building, so.
Yeah. So I want to dive into that. And before we do, I want to find out, like, how did you get into the passion about acquired structures? Like, you started as a firefighter, and then where did you figure out, like, holy shit, I really like acquired structures. That's my niche. Like, that's my thing. How did that happen for you?
I would say it was a combination of luck, fear, and obsession. So I was just lucky, right? I got hired by Seattle, and Seattle's been doing acquired structure training for our recruits for as long as anyone can remember. So it was just always been a thing. There was a possibility in my mind. I, you know, Aaron Fields works for the Seattle Fire Department, and I got into recruit training at about the same time that nozzle forward was really picking up in our department. So I got to go to Texas with him and participate in the acquired structure test burns down there. And when I went down to recruit training, I had a captain who let me play a little bit. He let me do some things that were a little outside the box. And just as soon as I started doing the acquired structure thing with our recruit classes, I realized, hey, this is as real as it gets, but it could be better. Because the way our training system worked here is that we had no instructor cadre that was devoted only to live fire training.
Okay.
So when folks would come and do a recruit school, they might gather some knowledge. When they did a 2-year assignment like I did, you might gather a little more knowledge if you were really invested and wanted to try things out and build your skill set. But as soon as that person left the training division, that knowledge base would dive, and you'd almost be restarting from zero.
Sure.
And so I was able to advocate, and eventually the department has adopted the formation of an official live fire cadre. So when we do acquired structures and even our fixed facility burns, if you're not part of this cadre, you don't get to participate. And it's not that. Yeah, and it's because we want to concentrate that knowledge. Right. And I think that's one of the main problems that we have, is that folks don't actually get really good at running live fire. We think that because they're a good firefighter, you're good at running live fire training. Not true. Totally different skill, right? And I lost my train of thought. Oh man, what was I gonna say?
You're talking about the cadre, right?
Oh yeah,
how they have the fixed cadre.
Yeah, you have to have a method for passing on and building knowledge, right?
Yeah.
I'm not gonna there's gonna be a point in a few more years where I'm not gonna want to do this as much as I do now. The knowledge base shouldn't die when I leave.
Right.
But a lot of fire departments, that's what they do. Right? You got your one expert, and they run this thing, and they run this thing, and then they retire. And it's like, how do we run that thing again? Oh yeah. That was John. He used to run that. I guess we'll start.
No, that's over. So true.
And so it was to try and build increase the consistency, and that lack of consistency, the lack of building knowledge, I think is why we get people doing crazy stuff, because nobody knows any better, right? There's no building of knowledge.
Yeah. Well, and I have a special place in my heart for acquired structures. When I was in Nebraska and I went through the Fire 1 class at a community college, this is back in the day before like Fire 2 was even recognized. So just to give you a little bit, not like Nebraska was way behind the times, but Fire 2 wasn't even a thing. And so when I went through Fire 1, a lot of the state fire marshal burns in the counties were live fire in an acquired structure. And at the community college in Lincoln, they had this like multi-million-dollar fixed facility that was made out of concrete and had, I talked about it with Dave. One floor was an office building, one floor was a garage, one floor was a residential house. And so it was cool because you had all these different experiences. But when we got to the live fire in the acquired structures, that was a completely different animal. I mean, it was so vastly different from what we as students were taught in a fixed facility. And I can remember going in there and like the floor creaking, and I'm like, God, is the floor going to give out? And just little things that like in your mind, you're not worried about in a fixed facility. But when you get into an acquired structure, there is that heightened stress level, right? And one of it stands out the most to me. We did a live burn in a room on the second floor of this farmhouse. It was like, maybe 1,800 square feet. And after they had burned in this corner like 2 or 3 times, they're like, all right, we need to overhaul and make sure that it's good so we can move on to the next room. And as I started to walk, my instructor goes, hey, dumbass, why are you sounding the floor? And I'm like, I didn't think I needed to. And he's like, you're in a real house. You have to sound the floor. And I was like, all right. So I hit with the Halligan, and it was like bang, bang, whoop. And the Halligan just was gone. And I'm like, what the hell? And I look, and there's a hole like 4 foot in diameter in the corner of this room that I was about to walk up on. And I'll never forget that, because that was the first time that I was like, oh, these houses really come apart. Like, they really disintegrate, obviously with fire. But that lesson to me stuck with me. And that was like month 9 of being a firefighter in school. And so that's carried with me through my entire career. So what do you think, as far as the acquired structures, is the benefit long term for the firefighters? I mean, as like, not just initial students, but like what you guys do with the live fire as continuing education. What is the benefit for that?
So for me, we primarily use live fire training for 3 things. And the first is what we call normalization of the live fire environment, which we talked about a bit ago, which is just getting people comfortable inside a burning building. And let me be clear, this is not a toughness test, and it's not a toughness test. The idea that you're going to fry students because you want to get them hot, that needs to disappear from the American Fire Service.
Agreed.
That doesn't mean there's not a place to expose students to significant heat, but it has to be intentional, and it has to be followed with, we're going to expose you to this much heat. This is what lesson I want you to get from it. If you feel this again, this is the action you take. If you have the hose line, if you're on the truck, if you're on the floor above, right? It has to be tied to something, right? So normalization of the live fire environment is the first piece. The second piece is giving cues and context for existing skills. So another problem that people have is that they expose people to realistic live fire training too early, right? If you do not have solid basic skills, you don't even need to be there, right? It's
Right.
way too early in the game for this. If somebody can't flow and move, there's just certain fire conditions I'm not even going to create, right? Because why would I do that? Right? It'd be silly. Why would I get somebody who's never done a VES before or even practiced it to do a VES on live fire? That would be irresponsible.
Right.
Right. But if they do have the skill set, where the new or the inexperienced firefighter struggles is, how do I actually apply the skill in the target environment? They go through the door, it's dark, it's hot. Do I flow and move now? How about now? How about now? I see some rollover. Do I flow now? And so then they start to engage the skill. Is it working well, or is it working inappropriately? How do I even know? All I've ever done is apply this skill in an environment where I can see and there's nothing else going on, right? So this gives us a chance for them to actually see the skill work. And the other thing that people should realize is not everyone has to actually do the skill, right? If I have an observation group and a single individual on the attack line, and I create a highly realistic fire, and they do a push, good or bad, and extinguish the fire, everyone who is watching, if they possess the same skill set, gets the same lesson.
Right.
There's well-documented psychological research that says that if I possess the same skill and I see someone who looks like me that I relate to do that skill, I now have faith that I can engage the skill.
Right.
And that brings it to the third point, which is it's a technical term, but it's creating student self-efficacy, which is their belief that they can apply the target skill in the target environment. And it's the difference maker, right? If you have a crew that has the skills and the belief, they will find a way to win, right? It goes back to something that Jay Bonifeld has said from time to time, which is, I go to a house fire and I know I'm going to put the fire out. I'm just working on how to do it the best way possible.
Right.
But if you don't have the belief,
I love it.
If you don't have the belief, then it doesn't matter what your skill set is. It doesn't matter how many people you bring to the scene. If you don't have the belief that your skills will win, you'll sit outside.
Right.
And it's funny, I've had more than one student show up at the beginning, and then at the end they'll say, man, that last fire we did before today, that would have been a defensive fire, or that would have been transitional exterior attack all day.
Right.
And now I'm totally comfortable going through the front door and flowing down the hallway or up the stairs. And it's not that their skill set has improved. It hasn't, not in 6 fires, right?
Right.
Their staffing hasn't improved, their response time hasn't improved, but now they believe that their skills will work and they're comfortable in the environment. And
Yeah.
I think you can do that almost indefinitely, right? The other piece that we do by just getting people to observe inside and out is you get people to start tying exterior cues and conditions to interior cues and conditions. So if you watch the fire grow and the nozzle or the other people engage with it on the interior, and then you take your rep on the outside and you're doing your 360s and your instructor's talking you through what they see and you see the window vent and then you hear the line go. Suddenly you think to yourself, well, the last fire looked like this on the inside. And now I'm seeing the same things on the outside.
Right.
So I know how these things relate. So now when I roll up on a fire, it's not actually a mystery on the inside anymore. Right now can actually have a much better prediction of, okay, I see 2 windows venting over here. I see some heavy smoke over here. I see some light smoke over here. So this area is going to be hot. This area is going to be cool. And when I open the door, I expect to see this.
Yeah. Well, so I'll talk about this because when you said it, I was like, oh my God, that's a perfect example. So when I started in the fire service, we had a lot of acquired structures that would have like half stories, right? And so we were pretty accustomed to knee walls, and I figured out really quickly that knee walls suck. And so, like, one of the coolest things was I remember one of my instructors was pulling everybody off to the side who was outside, and he was like, all right, look up at that half story. He goes, do you see how the smoke is pushing out of the front, but there's nothing coming out of the rear? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, there's 2 rooms up there. Like, that's the visual cue from the outside that there's 2 rooms upstairs because it's isolated, right? And at the time I was like, man, that doesn't make any sense, but whatever. And then when we went inside and we made a push up that stairwell, which I'm going to be 100% honest, back in the day, you didn't flow water until you saw fire. That was just a thing. So as soon as we got to the top of the stairs and I'm like, this is really effing hot. As soon as I turned to the left, I was like, there's the fire. And over here on the right is a door. And holy crap, he was right. There's 2 separate areas of this deal. And so, yeah, I love what you say about the interior conditions and what you're seeing visually making sense on the outside, because there is no way to replicate that, really. I mean, it's very, very, very difficult to do.
And yeah, that's why in our acquired structure training and even in some of our fixed facility training, I try and stress doing less, because most what we call live fire training is not actually training on fire. Right. It's a skills rep with a fire somewhere in the general vicinity, right? 2 good reps in a fixed facility or in an acquired structure, like actual good reps, is worth more than 20 evolutions where you go in, out,
right,
in, out. Well, everybody got on the nozzle. Doesn't matter. Every single one of those repetitions on the nozzle was worthless.
It was absolutely worthless.
You might as well just have stayed home and watched YouTube videos of fire. You probably have gotten more out of it. Because if we want to do a skills drill, great. Remove the stress.
Right.
Remove the fire, right? Just do the skills drill. And if you want to make it more difficult, make it longer, tire them out first, put them in 0 visibility. But all of that can be done without fire, and should be done without fire, because it's just an added risk, an added distraction that doesn't need to be there, right? And when it comes time to drill on fire, now it's all about the fire. Like that's why I like to say that, at least at West Coast Fire Training, fire is not a part of the prop. Fire is the point.
Yeah.
And that's all we're going to do, is we're going to sit here and watch this fire. And we're going to watch how it travels down the hall. We're going to watch how it degrades the building. We're going to watch how the heat travels up. So.
Well, and I got to be honest with you, man. Like the first time, so I think I met Bonifield first, and then he connected me with you. Is that?
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
sure that's how it is. Jay has a much larger presence on the social medias than I do.
Yeah. And so then like he connected me with Dave Pruitt, and like it was this big circle thing. But like when we sat there and we talked, I remember sitting there and talking to Jay, and I was like, dude, that video that you guys are putting out is legit. Like the content that you guys are putting out there for fire attack and fire behavior is amazing. And I was like, how are you guys getting the video? Like, what kind of are you using like the newest GoPro or like what? He's like, nah, bro. He's like, I literally take my cell phone like this and I hold my thermal imaging camera like this and we just videotape it. And I was like, really? And I mean, it's just something so simple, but the content that you guys started pumping out was like
I'll just pause you
insane.
1 second there, Dave. But the reason that was possible is because we're actually taking in the time to watch the fire instead of
Yes.
engaging in just a skills rep.
Yes. And
Sorry.
that's what I love about it. No, you're fine. But that's what I love about it, Ian, is that when you sit there and you look at like the last videos that you guys posted, right? And I can't tell who's who, right? Like I can't see. But you literally see a firefighter at the doorway and she opens up that line and people are screaming and she's like, I'm gonna go get it. And she just starts going down that hallway. And as soon as she starts whipping that line, I mean, you watch the fire behavior, and that even people just watching that at home are learning so much more than like what you said about the in out, in out, in out, in out. Um, so no, I mean it's super super cool what you guys have been able to do with the acquired structures. So let me ask you this, and I told you we were going to talk about 1403. So let's just like ask one
Let's do it.
question, and then we'll be done. This is where everybody's going to get up and like go, grab a coffee or go to the bathroom or whatever. But so with 1403, I mean, obviously it was written in blood, right? Like we've done some stupid shit over the years that caused us to have to come up with that standard. Um, what things do you feel like as a primarily acquired structure instructor? What things do you feel like need to be looked at or examined further to allow you to be able to better do what you do?
To do what I do, or for the fire service in general to do
So
this.
I want to start with you specifically. Like and every instructor, it's just like flying an airplane, right? Like everybody, the basic concept is the same, but everybody has their own finesse, right? So like I want to know with you specifically, like what things do you feel like would allow you to do your job better instructing with regards to the NFPA, NFPA 1403, and then we'll get to like holistically in the fire service, what do we need to look at?
I would like to have the ability to create different types of fires that are currently prohibited by the standard. For instance, I think it would be possible to safely create a 2-room fire. Uh, that's not permitted by the standard right now.
Right.
Yeah, that's mostly it. I hesitate to say that I'd like to be able to burn modern combustibles all the time because that stuff's terrible for you.
Right. Yeah, it is.
I would like to be able to do it every once in a while.
Yeah.
The few times that I've been involved with test burns using modern combustibles, I felt like because of the planning that was done and the education level and skill of the participants, that they were some of the safest burns I've been involved with. But I think that goes back to competency, right? I think, like I said, that with the rescue companies, right? The rescue company is able to engage in high risk training. They
Right.
regularly hang people 300 feet off the ground, off a crane or a skyscraper, and the consequences of failure in that is death. No
Right.
other
Yeah.
option.
There's no getting around that.
But no one looks at that and says, "Oh man, that's crazy."
Yeah.
What they think is those people have really done their homework and they must be really good at their skills.
Right.
And we need to have that same perspective for live fire training. The idea that anybody and anybody is just going to say, "Oh yeah, yeah, my neighbor's going to donate this house. We're just going to go burn in it. No big deal. You ever done that before? No, no, no. It's fine. We'll just follow 1403. No, 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 no. That's not how any of this should work.
Yeah, yeah.
Right?
Well, and I think it's so important though because listen, and I will say this: when I was talking at FDIC in August, I was doing a talk about realistic fire training, and I was talking about NFPA 1403, and in the very back of the room, I saw somebody, and I kind of had to squint and look behind everybody, and I was like, man, that guy looks really familiar. I'm pretty sure I know who that is, but I'm not really sure. I'm horrible with names. And he came up to me at break. He was like, hey, Dave Casey, 1403 committee member. And I was like, oh. And so, like when we started talking about it, we had such a great discussion, and Dave's such a great guy. But he knows that there's problems, right? Like he has admitted that there are some things that we need to look at. But I agree with you. Like, why is it that there are permissible limits for almost everything that we deal with, right? Like there's permissible limits for all these chemicals that we could be exposed to working in a manufacturing plant, but there is no permissible limit for the stuff that we deal with on a fire scene, right? We have the measuring equipment. They already get the measurements. We know how carcinogenic it is. And so, no, I'm not sitting there like you saying, we should be doing this every week. But why is it that annually we're not saying, okay, you're going to have one burn annually that is prescribed like this, that replicates realism, right? And then the rest of the time you can do acquired structures that meet the current standard. And again, maybe I'm getting off on a tangent here. It's just kind of my thing, but we have to wash our shit all the time, right? We have to take showers all the time. So is it really more dangerous to be able to burn modern combustibles than it was 5 years ago? Because I don't think it is.
Yeah, I couldn't really speak to that. Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, in terms of the cancer danger, that's always going to be the same.
Yeah.
In terms, I think the true danger of using modern combustibles, if you don't know what you're doing, is that you'll burn yourself or your students, because one of the ways that we have made live fire training safer in all levels is we've reduced the heat release rate.
Right.
So the speed of the event is slower, right? I mean, those are the two main ways I feel like 1403 has made us safer. Is it's slowed the speed of the event, and it's reduced fuel loads.
Yeah.
Right. And then a lot of people have simply decided that they're not going to do acquired structure training because 1403 is burdensome. And so if you're not doing the training, it's
you
zero
don't
risk.
have to worry about it. Well, and
I'll tell you honestly, like I really like the content we're putting out. I think it has high value, and that's why we do it. But I've lost sleep at night waiting for that news report where somebody burns themselves up because they try to replicate what we've done at West Coast Fire Training without understanding why it's okay. I mean, for instance, in the last set of videos, Jay does a great write up of the room flashing over and how you could see that, and how you could see the floor catching on fire and moving forward, and you could see the level drop in the area as the room flashed over, and then you could see on the thermal imaging camera how the line controls the fire. But if you weren't there, you wouldn't understand first that there were two charged hose lines in the room with the camera, a third charged hose line outside, and a fourth exposure line in place. And that the only reason that you have that visibility is because the configuration of the building allowed all the smoke and heat to rise into the second floor as soon as it left the fire room. Right. So somebody else goes and says, I'm going to try and replicate that video, and without the conditions, and they fry themselves.
Yeah.
That worries me all the time.
No, I couldn't. I can't imagine, especially with the acquired stuff. Like we do a lot of stuff in fixed facilities, and we've done a little bit of acquired stuff. But with the amount of stuff that you guys do, I can't imagine, how much that concerns you. So, do you address that with the students? I mean, do you do the whole like, "Hey, kids, don't try this at home,"
Yes,
or okay,
yes, um, yes, yeah, we do. We explain why we're taking the precautions we do. There's an initial safety briefing where we talk about what we're going to do. We do a debrief after every single fire that includes why we were able to do what we did. Um, yeah, I mean it's a big part of what we do
good,
because yeah, you know that someone's going to go back, and that's fine. We want people to be able to engage in high quality training. Just don't be stupid.
right? Yeah, I think it's don't
What I
ruin
would
it
say,
for yourself or any of us.
don't. It's not don't be stupid. Be humble. Understand where you are. Right. We've done some train the trainers for other departments, and one of the first things I tell them is you have to build slow. Right. You have to build your knowledge base. We'll do 2 days of burns and an acquired structure, and I'll say we've done one building in one configuration. Right. At one time of the year, because even the weather can change how the
Absolutely.
building reacts. And so you have to be very humble about what it is you actually know. Because it's easy to get really confident and say, oh, yeah, I got this figured out. I guess I'll just leave the safety line out in the front yard this time. Because it
Yeah.
kind of gets in the way, right? Or we'll just skip this little safety step and we'll just breeze past that because we're kind of in a hurry, right?
And I
So
think when you talk about live fire, it's risky to begin with. When you get into acquired structures, that risk is exponentially higher. And I don't. That's where I'm just torn, man. I mean, it really, I mean, it pulls at my heartstrings because I understand why 1403 is the way that 1403 is. But as an instructor, now I look back and I'm like, man, how can we like what's the future gonna hold? Like what things and holistically with the fire service when we were talking about 1403, I think we're gonna have to address some of that stuff. Like I think it's going to have to become more technical as far as what's allowed, what's not allowed, and why it's not allowed. You remember when they were talking about taking away the OSB and people lost their minds. I mean, it was like people were getting ready to go storm a building to go figure out why they were going to try and take away OSB. But at the end of the day, what else are we burning and why is it detrimental? Um, and so just blanketly saying like we're going to take away this material, right? But why? Because is that going to hurt us in 10 years? Is it going to hurt us in 20 years because of the lack of training?
well, one of the big issues I see with 1403 is that it's entirely rules based,
Right.
right? You can do this, you can't do this. But if you read risk management, rules based approaches only work for managing specific types of risk. And other types of risk are actually very poorly managed through a rules based approach. And they'll actually create like a checklist mentality where people just check, 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 check
Right.
without any conscious thought. So we comply with the standard because it's the right thing to do. It's the national standard, and also in Washington State, it's Washington State law. So,
Right. there's that
uh,
little tidbit.
but just for anybody who might be listening, just because it's not the law in your state doesn't mean you won't get held accountable to that standard. It's a national standard,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Um, yeah, but the just because we follow it, that's not what I feel like keeps us safe. What
Right.
keeps us safe is the planning. It's putting the hose lines in the right places. It's keeping the entire thing very simple by just creating observation groups. We have a series of 3 things that we always discuss with all participants before every single fire. We have an expected fire behavior. So this is what we expect to get. That way, everyone knows if that's not what we're getting, in a bad way, like that's not a surprise to anybody. We have
Right.
an expected extinguishment plan. Like the nozzle should not be making it up as they go along. This is a teaching environment. And that way, if the nozzle gets off track, everyone knows, okay, maybe I should move because they're getting a little off track. And the instructor will know immediately to correct them. We also have a movement plan. So if our observation group is going to move from room A to room B and go down the hallway, that is not something we're going to make up on the fly. We're going to
Right.
we're going to do that. We're going to talk about it. And if it's going to be complicated, we make them practice it beforehand.
I was just going to ask you if you make them actually go in and go through the motions of those plans, and that's amazing that you do. That's good.
Yeah, because I mean, if we're just going to start at the front of the living room and move to the back of the living room, we won't do that. But if we're moving down a hallway or from room to room, we make them walk it. And there's an established order of personnel, because you throw SCBAs on everybody and you make it dark, and
You
now it's
have no
getting hot
idea.
enough that you kind of want to bend over. Boy, you get bottlenecks real fast. And yeah, I mean, for instance, at the last big Arlington burn where we lit basically 2/3 of floor 2 on fire because it was one giant open room, like we practiced the fire extinguishment movement twice, because they go up and it's like, nope, that doesn't look good, do it again. Okay, do it again. And we practiced the safety line engaging, which was good because when the pump gave out,
You needed it.
the fire was mostly out at the time, but there was a plan in place and it engaged exactly. I mean, the other piece for safety is you have to just think a lot about how can things go wrong.
Right.
And then when you say to yourself, that'll never happen, plan for it to happen.
Yes. Like in short order. Like if you say that day, like that'll never happen. Probably within the next hour or two, something bad's gonna happen.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. We've spent entirely too long talking about 1403. Like I think everybody gets it. And the reason why I asked that question, I mean, I love picking the brain of other people that are into live fire because there are so many different views on it. I've talked to different instructors who are, very pro NFPA 1403 in its current state, and then I've talked to other people who are like, hey, I'd like to see these things change. And then there's people that are just impartial. So I do appreciate your honesty, because you could have just skated around it and been like, well, I think you should follow the standards to the letter of the T.
And I do. The other piece I would add, Dave, just before we get off this topic, is I think there should be a requisite knowledge piece, right? I mean,
Yeah.
And it can't be that line that says the instructor must demonstrate understanding of fire behavior. Like that is meaningless, right? In our fire department, if you're going to be the lead ignition officer, you have to do a certain number of burns, right? If
Right.
you are you can't just say, well, I've showed up here a bunch of times, right? There's a lead ignition who has to mentor you up. And, so that it has to be, we say that we're a trade, then it has to be a trade, right? You don't get to be a master electrician and design your own electrical systems just because you say you're an electrician, right? You got to be a journeyman, and you got to be a journeyman for some years, right? And then you have to take classes, you have to demonstrate knowledge, and if you don't get to be a master electrician. Right? And then when you try and say, hey, I'm going to bid for that job, and say, oh, are you a master electrician? No, but I'm pretty good. No, that's not how it is. And it needs to be the same way with live fire training, right? And I've taken as many classes as I can get on them, and some of them are good and some of them are less good. But do you know how many times we actually lit fires and someone said, hey, this is how you light the fire, and I'm going to watch you light the fire, and I'm going to watch you lead students in the live fire environment?
How many?
0. Right?
Wow. No, I mean, and that's the problem, man. I mean, this could be a 3-hour episode if we actually talked about all this stuff. And I think a lot of it goes back to, and I'm not going to say don't be stupid. I think a lot of it goes back to people thinking that they're doing the right thing, but they're really not. And and there are people who intentionally go out there and create training scars, um, because they, and I don't want to call them bullies, but I mean, I know people that use the heat as a punitive measure. Like, hey, we're going to take them out there, and they weren't fast enough gearing up, so let's go put them in the real heat. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my entire life, right? Like, that's not what that's meant for. Um,
Think
but
about
there
the
are people. Go ahead.
Sorry, you just spooled me up there for a second, Dave. Think about all the training scars that are being created there.
Yeah,
First, you're saying that the, a live fire environment is stressful, right? This is a place where I should be fearful, and if I don't do things right, people are going to come out and they're going to say I'm awful at my job, right? So as soon as I show up to a fire, I'm now as worried about doing my job well as I am paying attention to what is actually happening. Now I fry the student and I say, you should be able to take this. So what happens? They crawl down that hallway or they crawl through the house with the nozzle and don't open the line because Lord knows I don't want to get yelled at again.
right.
Right? I mean, when people when people crawl into a burning building and die on the nozzle because there's a flashover, that is not their fault. That is their
Yeah,
trainer's fault.
absolutely. No, and that's and again, guys like you, guys like me, uh, in the early days of being even a firefighter. Let's talk about before we were instructors, right? We didn't say anything because we didn't want to get in the middle of that. It's like, man, y'all, you guys messed up. You guys messed up. You're going to pay the price for that, right? And we walked the other way. And now, as instructors, like, man, I've only done it twice in my life, and I'm not proud of it. And I'm not going to, name drop anybody, but I've gone up to two instructors in my life and been like, dude, that's fucked up. Like, you need to stop right now. That's not cool. Don't do that. If I'm here and I see you do it again, like, we're done. And it wasn't even like my cadre. It was at a conference that I was at. But I saw them using that punitively, and that's not constructive for anybody. So in a big nutshell, I think that's where we've kind of veered off the path in the fire service, is that we've kind of allowed those people to do those kind of things.
Yep.
So yeah, and I will say, I will say this, when we talk about, because I want to pick your brain on this too. So when you're talking about instructing, you mentioned earlier that getting people into live fire too soon is detrimental, right? So if you had your choice of fuel fed fire, gas fed fires, fixed facility, acquired structure,
Let me pause
and
you
all
for
you
a second.
go ahead.
I don't think getting people into live fire too soon is detrimental. It's when you're asking the wrong things, right? If
Okay.
your students are comfortable masking up and they can do so safely, fine. Put them in live fire. Get them used to heat. Get them used to understanding what their gear feels like when they're warm. There's a ton of lessons you can learn to do that normalization piece really early in someone's career. It's when you're asking them to perform a skill too early, right? If I'm saying I'm going to create a push fire and I want you to push this hallway, and the last time I asked you to do that was 2 hours ago, and I gave you 20 minutes of instruction on it, probably too soon, right?
Right. Okay. Well, and listen, man. That's why I love talking with you, because you don't bullshit. You're like, hey, listen, stop talking. That's not what I said. Like, my wife loves you because of that. Because she's like, oh, he does that to you too, huh? So
Well,
thank
we
you,
just need
thank you.
clarity. I think
No, and I don't want to misquote you. I don't want to misquote you. So I'm glad you said
no, I
something.
don't think you mean that. I don't think you mean that. We're just talking about a lot of things all at once, and so it's easy to run past things. And
Absolutely. Absolutely. But so okay, so back to my question though. So when you talk about the best option in your opinion as an instructor, so you have the fuel fed fires, you have and I'm even going to throw in like virtual reality, like putting up a virtual reality simulation to show certain things. Um and then, acquired structures. What do you think is the best progression? Like for a new student coming into the fire service, how do you think we need to like crawl, walk, run with live fire? Because I know that that's different between different instructors, and I've heard different answers from different instructors. So I'd like to hear what you think.
Me personally, I would start off with lots and lots of video of real fires in various configurations and conditions, right? If people should just be really comfortable looking at fire, right? It shouldn't be the first time that the first time that you see two windows blown out shouldn't be when you're rolling up on it. When you roll up on a porch fire extending to, the side of a house, you shouldn't wonder, well, do I need an inch and 3/4 or 2.5? Right?
Right.
Those questions can all be answered just by watching lots of film, right? And that's that's super basic. We should be watching tons of film all the time, right? The next piece is I would never use a gas fed prop. I'll be honest.
Thank you.
It doesn't react the same way a building does, right?
Yeah.
And the hose stream doesn't interact with it in the same way. Um, I would use fake smoke all the time for obscuring visibility. That's great. Zero visibility, people should be doing that kind of training all the time, early on and throughout your career, just to get used to navigating in zero visibility. In terms of fixed facility, I think fixed facilities are good for demonstrating early stages of fire, getting people used to being in heat in a way that's informative, not in a way that's punitive, right? Hey, this is
Right. Right. Yeah.
look, you can actually come right up to this fire in your gear and you won't be hurt, right? And that's a useful lesson. Or let's create this really hot hallway. We're gonna have you go to the front of the hallway and just stop here. Can you feel the difference in your heat through your gear? This is what this means to you. When you feel this on your ears, that's what it means. And you should either leave the environment or use the hose line. After that, I would progress to the acquired structure. Um, and I would use mostly the acquired structure for the things I've talked about. Getting people used to being in the environment because nothing else is going to react like an acquired structure. Um, and then seeing how their skills actually affect the fire, because in a fixed facility, it's just not going to be the same because you'll always have, especially with the hose stream, massive steam generation. Right, it's almost impossible to get away from that. You can still give decent visuals of how a hit and move or a push positively affects the environment ahead of and behind the nozzle, but it won't be as impactful as an acquired structure. I think the fixed facility is good for just reps with smoke.
Sure.
I know in certain academies close to us, they just create a push fire, just a couple of Connex boxes. It's basically a room and a hallway, and they'll fill the hallway with fire, and the student gets to push that and extinguish the fire. Reset, go again. Reset, go again. But each time they're actually creating an actual push fire, so that the student sees that, and it's just creating that visual cue. I think all live fire training should be designed to create a specific response to a specific cue.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, what are we doing? If all we want to do is just drag hose around, just go out to the drill court, right?
But that wouldn't be as cool, man.
Yeah, but it's actually better.
Yeah,
it's not as sexy, that's for sure. And if we want to do big MCOs, super important, right? Getting those coordination drills, but that's what we have to recognize it is. A big MCO, it's a coordination drill, right? And so we don't need fire for that. Everybody's going to hate me in my department for saying that, but
no, I listen. Okay, so like you say that everybody's going to hate you. I don't think everybody's going to hate you. I think you're.
Oh, we've been doing tons of MCOs in my department. Everybody is dog tired of them.
Yeah. Well, and listen, we did. Yeah, we've done a couple here lately that I'm just like scratching my head, like, okay, wait a minute, why are we? Okay, let's keep doing it this way because the sooner we get it done, the sooner we can go home. But no, I think that people envision live fire as this super cool, sexy thing, and I truly believe that there are people out there that can't fathom doing certain types of training without live fire. Like they don't understand that it's not necessary in the case of what they're doing. But if you tried to tell them that, they'd be like, "Well, I mean, we have to have live fire because I mean we're doing like nozzle stuff." And it's like, no, you don't. Like the in out, like you talked about. But even more importantly than that, how many times have you seen people that have, I would say, pretty decent fire, but the skills acquisition wasn't there, and so people go in there and they just suck at the skill that they're doing. And so, what did you accomplish? Like, what did you really get done in that scenario?
You actually undermined faith in the skill because you didn't spend enough time developing the skill. Then you make them apply it. It doesn't work. And now they say this skill sucks.
Right,
As opposed to
right,
saying, I'm bad at the skill, they say this skill doesn't work.
yeah.
So, yeah,
Well, okay. So let me ask you this because you brought up a really great point. So, I mean, have you ever had somebody who was trying to? I'll use smooth as much as I know that this is going to open up a can of worms. So the smooth bore versus fog thing, right? Like somebody set up a fire and had a really good acquired structure burn, and there's really great fire, but they didn't know how to properly use a smooth bore nozzle. So because they didn't get the effect that they wanted, everybody walked away going, "Oh, smooth bores suck. That was the dumbest thing ever."
no, because I'll be honest, we do skills evaluations prior to acquired structure training, and we ask people, have you ever used smooth? If we're going to run smoothbore nozzles, first off, we pressure test them and test the lines. Right?
Right.
Is this combination even going to work? Right? And then if people, we don't ask people to do things they're not good at. Right? So if you show up to a West Coast fire training event and we do our skills evaluation, and in the attack, the folks who are going to be on the attack line, the four of them, and only one of them knows how to flow and move, that person's going to be on the nozzle. And if the other person says, well, I thought it was my turn, no, it's not about you. It's about getting the effect we're looking for, the visual cue that we're looking for. And if you can't do it, I'm not going to put you in that position. It's not going to accomplish the training goal we want, and it's not safe for everybody inside.
Right. Well, and the reason why I asked is because we had this probably been about 4 or 5 years ago. We had a department a couple hours west of us, and I heard this secondhand from someone. But then I actually got to talk to the guy who told the story. But they were trying to transition their department over to smooth bores, and they decided to skip over everything and just go straight to live fire. Like, hey, let's just get some smooth bore nozzles to test, and let's just go into a live fire and just try it and see how it works. And had it completely mismatched with their hose package. Just everything went to shit really quick. And the nozzles whipping around inside this box, and the kinks are limiting the flow. And so they walked away from that, and the people that they were trying to impress were like, no, that was the dumbest thing ever, we'll never buy smooth bores. And so I feel like they were trying to use that coolness of the live fire, and it was so ill intended, in the end, from what they were wanting to do.
I think this goes back to a cultural problem in the fire service, or maybe a mindset. I don't know if it's culture or mindset or what, but we are used to solving problems in 3 hours or less,
Right.
usually in 30 minutes or less. And so we are not good at long term projects or doing homework, right? We're just not good at doing homework. And that's one of the things I always tell people if they're trying to work towards live fire in their agency is you got to be patient. I mean, my agency has been doing acquired structure live fire training for recruits for as long as anyone can remember. Never had done operations acquired structure live fire training. After we started pushing for it, and this is with everyone on board, everyone saying this was a good idea, and having a foundation for acquired structure live fire, still took us 4 years to get it going.
Man.
You just have to be patient, right? And if you want to, it's the same thing. If you want to bring in smoothbore nozzles, do your homework. Does this work with what we have? How does this work? What kind of problems am I going to run into? Who are the people who are going to fight against me no matter what the data? Like,
Right.
and this is and same thing with live fire. Like, do your homework. Have you ever done this before? Like, what are the issues that are going to happen? I mean, I'll think about a building over and over and over and over again. I'll take all of my instructors through the building, say, where are we going to have problems? This is my plan. Where's my plan wrong? Like, yeah, we just got to think a little more deeply about things.
I agree. No, I completely agree. Now, a side note, if they would have got that pulled off, like this department a couple hours west, if they would have got it pulled off with that one scenario, I would have been pissed because it took me 7 years to get smoothbores in my department. If they would have done it, I would have been like, "Are you effing kidding me?" So, I props to them though. They're still trying, and I give them kudos. Those guys are still trying, and then they I think they learned. So what things? Okay, so we've talked about a lot of different stuff, right? We're at an hour and 16 minutes, and we've covered I think like 15 different things. What have we not covered that you want to talk about or you want to say?
I mean, I guess the main things I would say is for anyone listening to this or anyone who's watching West Coast Fire Training stuff, I'm going to give you some times when you should not be burning. So don't burn if your students don't have the skill, right? The foundation of any good training program is skills. And you should be working that 99% of the time. The live fire training is just the icing on the cake that gives the skills the context. So don't burn if your people don't have the skills. Don't burn big if you and your cadre don't have the skills. Start small. There's value at every level of live fire. I mean, I look back at videos of the live fire training we did and I laugh at how small they were, but that's what we were able to do and what we could do safely at the time, right? You have to build yourself up. It's just like bodybuilding or any other skill set. You got to build slow. Don't burn if you cannot control the environment. I had a department that wanted to do live fire training and they get like 5 inches of rain a year and they wanted to burn buildings down and they're surrounded by woods. They have massive wildfires every year. And I mean, you just can't do it there. Like you might just not be able to do it. Don't burn if you don't need to, right? I talked to an individual who came to one of our burns and he'd been to a live fire burn with a volunteer department he'd been involved with. That volunteer department had 15 people. A single, like really dangerous acquired structure training. Why? Like it didn't make any sense. They didn't have the staffing or the response times or even the equipment to go interior. And they were taking massive unnecessary risks. So, and then if you want to work towards live fire training, like I said, you got to think deeply and take your time. So I'll go through the points that I remind people, which is number one, you got to educate yourself. If you are if you're asking people a lot about 1403, that's great, but just by the standard, right? If you don't know 1403 like the back of your hand and you're trying to get into live fire training, like you need to start over, right? Live fire training is 300 level and 1403 is high school. So if you don't know 1403, if you don't know every line of duty death associated with live fire training, like you need to back out and start again. You need to start all over. You need to get as much live fire training as you can so you can figure out what mistakes other people are making and get better. You need to be nice to everybody. This is something I can't stand. There's there seems to be a popular rebel mentality in the fire service right now. I'm going to rebel against the safety culture. I'm going to tell people how it is. I'm going to let this chief know that they're not doing it right. Like, that doesn't work, right? You got to be nice to people. That doesn't mean you can't tell the truth. You have to tell the truth, but you got to be nice, right? I've had people I know, friends of mine, who were advocating for excellent ideas get shot down because they were jerks when they tried to present, right? And then when it comes to presenting, you got to get good at writing and speaking, right? That's not usually a skill that a lot of firefighters have, being eloquent in front of the mayor or people on budget committees. But if you want to ask for money, if you want to put together a training program, you're going to have to write your ideas down, and you're going to have to be able to present them clearly and eloquently to the people making decisions. And if you can't do that, they're not going to take you seriously. Get involved in training, build a solid reputation. I mean, if you want to get live fire training going and you're not even involved in your training division, come on, man. Be humble. You're going to make mistakes. And as soon as you think you know exactly what you're doing, man, that's when you really got to watch out. So that's all I got, Dave.
So I just want to bring up and I zoomed in on you because people don't want to stare at this, but
it threw me off for a sec. I was like, whoa, he said this would happen.
That's why I warned you before. But okay, so I have to say this because I was laughing so hard and I had my mic muted, but I was laughing my butt off when you said, like, some of us aren't good speakers, some of us don't do good presentations. Dude, that's because a lot of us are big dumb animals, right? Like that's what we do. We're like, oh, fire, spray water, and so when we get in that position where you have to go and for example, we're in the process of building a fixed facility at my department, and we're going to do it partially homegrown, and then we're partnering with some commercial manufacturers to do windows and doors and some of the other stuff. But I had to go before a board and pitch it, and I was like, "Hey, Chief, are you sure this is are you sure you want me to do this?" Because I can go up and I can stand in front of a class of 200 people, and it's fun, and I enjoy it, and I like the high. This doesn't sound fun to me. I feel like, I have to be on point every single point that I'm trying to make, because I was asking for a lot of money. And so I love what you said. And the biggest thing, the takeaway for me, which was hard, and I'm going to admit something that I've probably never admitted on social media. So whatever, here we go. Man, humility was hard for me in the beginning. I wanted to go out there and conquer the world. And at first, when I started getting into teaching within my own organization or even teaching kind of regionally, there were a lot of times where I felt pressured to try to act like I knew more than I did. And so the fact that, I got humbled very quickly. And thank God it wasn't live fire stuff. This was more like skills acquisition. But I was humbled very, very, very quickly. And so a lot of people that know me know that I'm loud, I'm opinionated. But what I've heard from so many people over the years, to your point, is if I'm going to be loud and boisterous, it's going to be about something that I know what I'm talking about. I don't speak on stuff that I don't know about. And if I do, I'll tell you up front, I don't know, but I'm going to give you this guy Ian Bennett's number, and you're going to call him, and he'll be able to explain it way better than I can. Right?
Yeah. And even if you know a ton, there's still ways to get good feedback, right? There's not a lot of people, and this is going to sound arrogant, doing acquired structure stuff the way we are. But you know who I bring in to watch? Mentors of mine who are really good at organization, or really good at teaching, or really good at leading people. Like, they don't know how to set up the acquired structure the same way I do, but they can sure tell me if I'm not managing my team well, or if I'm not organizing the event as well as it could be, because all those things are going to, cause hiccups. So.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, and so I'll ask you this as an instructor, and this is kind of getting away from the live fire acquired structure questions, but I feel like, and we were just having this conversation when we were up in Nebraska. I feel like now more than ever, in the fire service, we're having more collaboration like what you're talking about. I mean, I feel like if and I got to be 100% honest with you, if we're going to do acquired structures, like my dream team is like you and Jay and Dave and a couple other people. Bring you guys in, have you guys do the acquired structure part, and like I'll deal with the logistics because that's my thing. Like I like dealing with the logistics. So you let me know when you're going to start the fire, and I'll go in there and spray some water and have some fun. But aside from that, like I feel like now in 2021, that is more of a reality than what would have been 5 or 10 years ago. Do you feel that way?
I'll be honest, that's one of the things I don't know much about. I'm not really well traveled. I've been fortunate enough to be part of a big department with a ton of resources, so I haven't had to go to a ton of conferences to get training that other people just don't have access to. Uh, I mean, I think that's great. Collaboration, we should we should always be collaborating, getting
So
outside your
I think what I heard
silo.
you say is that you wanted to come to Kansas and do some acquired structure, but that's what I heard you just say. I don't know if you guys heard it.
That sounds like fun. I will be honest, like it's not my dream to do acquired structures every weekend.
Yeah, I know.
Um, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of stress. It's time away from the family. My dream would be like a couple times a year go teach some fire department that already has good skills. Like, hey, this is how you do good live fire training.
Yeah.
Um, you know that I sometimes feel like instructors get a good skill set and they kind of want to hold that tight so they can get on that teaching circuit.
Well,
And
yeah, because knowledge is power, man. Didn't you know that?
because that
Knowledge is power.
that's not me, man. You can have it pay. I mean, I do want to get paid for my time, but yeah, the idea of spending 10 years traveling every other weekend, lighting
Yeah.
fires, that sounds terrible.
Well, and it's okay. So my wife and I were just having this conversation because she actually went with me to Nebraska, and so in the car ride between Lincoln and Osceola, where we were going, it was like an hour and 40 minutes, hour and a half, and so we had no kids. So it's like we enjoyed the silence for about 20 minutes. We didn't say a word to each other, and then when we started talking, she brought up some philosophical stuff, but she said, "Do you really like traveling and doing this?" And I said, "Yeah, I mean, I love doing it and I love traveling." Um, but I am very cognizant and aware of how much time I'm away from my family. But what I told her is I want to get it out of the way now because down the road I'm not going to be able to do it. Like I didn't do this to your point, like I wasn't traveling as much when my kids were younger because I wanted to watch them grow up. And so now that they're getting a little bit older, and Aiden, my 10-year-old, he actually goes with me to a lot of classes, and so he can travel, and Leo will as well when he can. But yeah, I mean, I think that if you're not I respect you for your view because I think there are so many people out there that are just chomping at the bit and they don't realize how much it sucks. I mean, there are times where I'm booked. If I'm not at work, I'm traveling, and if I'm not traveling, I'm at work, and I don't get to see my family for like 2 weeks.
Yeah,
So
I mean, I'll be honest. I've already thought about. My department does tons of acquired structure stuff now, and I'm involved in a ton of that. So like, I could just kind of roll up this West Coast fire training thing and just that was fun and move on to the next thing. So
yeah, don't do that. Please don't do that. Please don't do that. So how can people get a hold of you? Like nobody's going to call and ask you to travel around the country, but how can people try to get a hold of you, or not try, but how can people get a hold of you to get information, pick your brain if they want to know more about um, the things to do or the things not to do, or just kind of shoot the shit with you? Like, how can they? What's your preferred method?
uh, the easiest way I think is probably West Coast Fire Training's Facebook page. That would be the easiest way to reach out. Um, or the West Coast Fire Training website. You can email me directly through there. Um, yeah, either one of those would be a good way to start, and then we can you know chat online for a little bit, see where we need to go, and then probably on the phone after that.
Yeah, and I gotta say, like you are a very down to earth. Like it was pleasant talking to you the first time because that's always weird. Like whenever I because I got your info through somebody else. So I was like, man, I don't want to cold call this guy. And when I did, like you did the whole like, okay, who is this? Who the hell is this dude from Kansas?
Well, it's funny that's why I would say let's start with some text messages, because you gotta feel somebody out, because every once in a
yeah,
while you're like, oh, okay, yeah, this is not gonna happen.
yeah, you got the crazies. But no, I mean, it like I said, there you are definitely not one of those people that holds the information near and dear. You are very willing to spread the message, and that's what I love about you. I mean, that's what the people that we associate ourselves with are very much that way. Um, so we're at the hour and a half mark. So let's kind of wrap it up. But I want to thank you for taking time out of your evening and spending time with us. I
Yeah, no
know
problem.
we're a couple hours apart, but you were all about it. So um, remember to keep me included when you guys are doing live acquired structures out there on the West Coast, and I'll hop in my car and drive out there. Uh, I know this last time it was like we were talking about it earlier before we started the show. It was like 2.5 weeks ago.
Yeah, something like that. Maybe three and a half at this point.
Yeah, and so I think I loosely had told someone that was there that I was going to try and make it, and then I completely spaced it off with everything going on. And then I saw pictures on Facebook, and I was like, "Oh my god, I was going to be there! I was so going to be there!" And I was super jealous. So even if it's just like a quick text message, like, "Hey man, we're burning a bunch of houses like next week. Don't forget." I would appreciate it.
I will try and remember. I'll be honest, lots of people do that, and I've had more than one person say, "Hey, man, you didn't you didn't let me know that you guys were doing it." It's like, bro, like I am super busy with my regular life, and then I'm trying to organize this.
Yeah.
You really think I'm keeping track of like how many people say, "Hey, give me a text message"?
So what? Here's what we'll do. I got it. It's super easy. So we'll start a group text. So you just send me the numbers of everybody that's told you that, and we'll just start a group text, and we can all just remind each other. It'll be fun. This is the life of a firefighter, man. Like, if I didn't, my wife has to remind me when I'm going to work. She'll be like, "Hey, don't forget you have to work tomorrow." I'm like, "Oh God, okay, yeah, nope, I have to go get my stuff." So, but no, I want to thank you for taking time. It was a pleasure. For those of you watching, remember that you can get these episodes on all the major podcast platforms. So if you're working out, driving for an hour to work, you can listen to them on the podcast. If you want to watch it on YouTube, it'll be available on our YouTube channel, and then through Facebook. If you have any questions, you can contact Ian through his website. And if you have anything else that you guys want to talk about with Valor Fire Training, you can go to www.valorfiretraining.com, or you can hit us up on Facebook, Instagram. We just got on TikTok. That's new. So that was my son's idea. So go check out our TikTok and follow us. So until the next time we talk, take care, be safe, and we'll talk to you guys soon.
Peace.